with demand expected to come back, the question remains, does this mean the economy is back on track?
Companies now, after experimenting with offshore in places like India, Philippines, and Poland, want to bring those jobs back.
We invest in the U.S. We're the biggest exporter in the country. In the cycle we're in right now, we're creating jobs.
From Radio America, it's Neil Asbury's Made in America, the show that explores American industry, large and small, and promotes American-made products everywhere. Put Neil Asbury's Made in America to work for you.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman. So, Rich, trade and tariffs continue to dominate the news, and we're going to have a great show today. We're going to talk about tariffs. Obviously, things are really heating up with China. More tariffs, another $16 billion's worth. We have the U.S. implementing the $16 billion, and then we have China, of course, immediately retaliating. In early September, we're going to hear the status of another $200 billion of tariffs that President Trump has threatened. Will that be 25%? Will it be 10%? When will they actually take place? China says, hey, if you do that, we're going to retaliate. Problem is, China doesn't have a lot more to retaliate on because they don't buy anything from us, and that's the problem. And but we are going to see where that's going, because that really does up the ante, because I think we're up to $50 billion right now. So going to another $200 billion, a multiple of what has happened to date, and already what has happened has caused some major concerns around the world. I just was up in New York City refinancing our company, and we're meeting a number of different lenders. It's a very exciting process for us. A very transformational event for our company. And every one of the presentations of the potential lenders had major concerns, major questions about how do the tariffs impact you? How do the tariffs impact you? So this has definitely become a major issue, especially companies who are involved with global supply chains. And it's not good. It's not good on many levels. And some levels it is good. Other levels, it's a real worrisome thing. I mean, a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of small businesses are being impacted by this. The best hope here is that we would have some sort of solution soon. But President Trump is holding the Chinese feet to the fire. And we have a great guest on, Rich. Our first guest today is actually written a book by China, a very successful book. He's the author of Bully of Asia, Why China's Dream is the New Threat to the World Order. A very, very great book, fascinating book about China and why President Trump is doing what he's doing. We're very pleased to have Steve Mosher joining us now. Steve, welcome to Made in America.
Well, it's good to be here, Neil.
And Steve, besides your book, you just published a piece, Trump's Policies Could Enable America's Economy to Outpace China's. And a fascinating piece. And, I just also returned from China a couple of weeks ago. And, President Xi is very popular over there. He's a very, very powerful leader. The Chinese are very patriotic. And up until now, they're very much supporting him and his positions on how to do business with the United States and the retaliation and so on and so forth. So you got two very powerful leaders here kind of going at each other. But the fascinating thing that I liked about your piece was, don't believe this Chinese government, propaganda about what is their economy really growing at. Is it 6.5%? And President Xi says we're growing at 6.5%. Obviously, the whole government says that, and just kind of, everybody believes that. But is it true? Is it really true? Can we believe the numbers coming out of China? It is, in fact, America's economy now growing faster than China's. And does that mean China's economy is not going to be the world's dominating economy like many pundits have suggested? So kind of untangle this for us.
Well, I think we have to understand that the increased tariffs to date, which is $50 billion, right, as of last night at midnight, have already clipped about 0.5% off of China's economic growth. And remember, the only sector of the Chinese economy that operates according to market principles or anything close to market principles is the export sector. A lot of those exports come to the United States. And so if that export sector is undermined at all, the ripple effect through the Chinese economy is just enormous. And we've seen already the country's industrial output is down, retail sales in China are down, investment is falling below forecast. The stock market's tanking. The currency is weakening. I mean, they've got all their indicators are pointed in the opposite direction from ours. Our indicators are almost all pointed up. Theirs are almost all pointed down. And the reason is that Trump is finally trying to get a level playing field where trade is concerned. I get a little irritated when I hear people say that Trump is starting a trade war with China, because the fact is China has been in a trade war with us for about the last quarter century. And what Trump is trying to do is he's trying to end the trade war, not try to start a trade war, but try to end the cheating, the cyber thefts, the non-tariff barriers, the tariff barriers, everything that prevents American goods and services from competing on a level playing field in China. And that's a good thing, I think, for all Americans. I think it's going to work out well in the end, by the way.
Well, what I find interesting in this piece is a good friend of ours is mentioned in this article, and it's Gordon Chang. And Gordon's been all over the place for the last half a year.
Well, with the North Korea thing.
He was in North Korea. He was on like 24 hours a day. He was all over the place. But he suggests in this article, it's mentioned that he suggests the Chinese economy is only growing at around 2% at the present time.
Yeah.
And I find that to be, this is really incredible. This is a tremendous revelation when you think about it, because we have finally somebody in Washington who's saying, listen, I recognize the war for what it really is. And we did, and as you just very aptly pointed out, we did not start this war. This is an economic war that was started a couple of decades ago, maybe even back in the 70s when Nixon first visited China. Maybe that was the kernel thought that started this whole concept of having them overtake our economy. Maybe that's a reason why Mao and others wanted to go ahead and open up the country. But I do find that rather amusing. And I have to tell you that I agree with you. I'm very pleased when I see this administration take them to task and realize, we have a strong economy, and the best fight that we can have is have a strong economy and make sure that we get a fair share on their land.
So, Steve, what is the end game on this, though? I mean, I don't think anybody wants a prolonged sort of situation here. And, I got to tell you, there are a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of businesses, a lot of people have been hurt by this. People have built businesses based on a sort of condition that our government has said, this is the terms, this is the way you do business. And they've worked hard, they sacrificed, they've invested, people's jobs are on the line. I mean, what is the outcome? What is the moment? Where does this end, and what does it look like when it does end?
Well, here's the thing. Your co-host mentioned Gordon Chang, who's an old friend of mine. He and I published books simultaneously back in 2001. He published a book called The Coming Collapse of China, and I published a book called Hegemon, China's Plan to Dominate Asia and the World. And people poo-pooed both books. They said, to my book, China doesn't want to dominate Asia. It certainly doesn't want to dominate the world. Well, everybody has come around to the view now that China is an aggressive, destabilizing, disruptive power that wants to replace the United States as a dominant power on the planet. And Gordon was right, only he was too early. You see, because the reason why China's economy has not collapsed is because we have been transferring in the last few years about $1 trillion of wealth a year from the United States has gone to China. How has it gone to China? Well, about $600 billion of that is intellectual property theft of all kinds, from fashion designs to the latest Hollywood movies to, dual-use technology, high-tech stuff from Silicon Valley and so forth. Add that to the trade deficit, $400 billion, and that's $1 trillion transfer of wealth. So Gordon was right, but what he didn't take into account was this huge transfer of wealth from China, from the United States to China over the years that has kept the economy of China afloat, even though it has rising debt, has massive debt. It has an aging population because of the one-child policy. They're missing 400 million people from their population because of the one-child policy over the last 38 years. They have now a labor shortage in parts of China because of all the missing Chinese workers who have been eliminated. They have massive corruption. They have unproductive investment. They have a lot of problems that are now coming home to roost, and I think are being exacerbated by the fact that Trump is finally getting serious about a level playing field. What's going to happen? Well, look, there's little doubt that the only reason that the Chinese are back in Washington, D.C. right now at the negotiating table is because of the threat of additional tariffs. Only that threat. That's them around. Were it not for that threat, they would continue to forever because the current situation.
Why didn't they send someone more senior, though? Why did they,
why secondary, third level?
Why that?
Face. It's all about face. If they send that person and the negotiations don't work out, that senior person loses face and gets blamed.
Well, Steve, I mean, this is
terrific.
Very fascinating. We're going to have to get you back because this is obviously going to unfold, and the resolution to this is just going to be even more fascinating than it is right now. So great to have you with us, Steve Mosher, author of Bully of Asia, Why China's Dream is the New Threat to World Order. Wow. Very, very good stuff, Steve. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you.
Coming up, Dr. Ruff and I are going to have a discussion about a number of things in the headlines that impact your jobs.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. So, Rich, before we leave for this week, China tariffs, any further thoughts?
Well, I thought Steve was excellent in his conversation. What people believe may not and probably not is the truth. And I find it very intriguing that he said, finally we have a president, finally we have an administration that recognizes that China really is in a weaker position than they ever thought. And to continue down a path is not the right way to go. And to actually be strong and be firm in what you believe in to protect American products going overseas is the right way to go. And it appears that, and I've always embraced it, I said, I think Trump's doing the right thing.
Well, what really struck me, and I should have known this and I should have recognized it, but the fabrication of the GDP numbers in China.
Unbelievable.
And all of these, whiz kids and all these really smart people, just take that as gospel. They just say, oh, yeah.
They're doing great.
That's the right number.
They're roaring.
That's the right number. But when you think about it, it's a fabricated number from the Chinese government, right? And nobody questions it. And if the government says that's how far we're growing and that's how much we're growing and this is what we're doing, just everybody just falls in line with that. The whole media falls in line. Everybody falls in line. That's what they're doing. But the fact is they're not growing at that rate. So when they do all of these beautiful Excel spreadsheets and show, what's happening with all this compounded growth over these years and years and years, and finally in 2027, and that's what a lot of people say in Stephen's article was 2027, the Chinese economy will now eclipse the United States. But it's all based on false information.
That's right.
It's all based on false information. The economy isn't growing at that rate. In fact, what is it? Gordon Chang says, well, it's only growing at 2%. So, it's not even near the 4% that the United States is. So if the United States is growing at 4%, and also it's being compounded at a much, much larger economy, right? So it's a lot harder to grow a big number than it is to grow a small number.
Well, of course.
Right? So the percentage of growth on a big number, and if you're growing at 4% and China's growing at 2% on a smaller economy, that means that the American economy is getting bigger and bigger and bigger, and actually China's falling behind. It's not even catching up. Well, it's actually falling behind.
He made he made a lot of interesting points, but one of the things I find intriguing is that he indicated that they have a labor problem looming on the horizon right now due to their own policies of the one-child policy. So eventually, they're going to run out of people to drive that economy. Literally, that economy.
What it means is that you're going to have an aging population.
Yeah, and then who's going to work the population?
But by the way, we have the same problem. I mean, the birth rates in the United States have been very low. So, that's fascinating. And a country that has the biggest problem than any is Japan. Because of their immigration policies or the lack of immigration and the lack of people having babies over there, I mean, the Japanese population is going to radically decline. I mean, so that's another fascinating thing that's happening. But yes, population, demographics, and all of that. Great stuff to talk about. But hey, look, let's segue here to a second. Two headlines, very different. Very, very different. And we talk a lot about the evolution, I would say revolution in retail, right?
That's right.
Revolution in retail.
And I know which two you're going for.
Okay, there you go. Target. CEO raves about economy. This is the best consumer environment that I've seen in years.
Yeah, he's jazzed about it.
And
Just feeling great.
And then another headline this week. Sears is closing 46 more stores. Gloom and doom. I mean, look at that. I mean, two different, very iconic retailers in America, two very, very different results.
Well, and then there's a third one that I thought you were going to pick out as well, and that is at the same time, Target saying, cool, everything's great. Sears is saying, oh, my God, we got to close another 46. By the way, their sellout sales, their closing sales start next week, by the way. But then they say Alibaba has raised their revenues year over year by 61%. So what that's telling you is that there's a tremendous revolution in the retail market right now.
Well, Alibaba,
some people get it and some people don't.
Yeah, Alibaba, of course, the great e-commerce internet company in China.
That's right.
But, then you look at what is happening with Amazon. And, they're not just here in the United States, but around the world. I mean, Amazon is a massive company outside the United States. All the business they do in the United States, outside the United States, just 5 countries equal that. The UK, France, Germany, Japan, and China, Amazon equals the United States. I mean, so this whole thing with internet e-commerce is a world phenomenon. Very fascinating. But don't count Walmart out. They've had their best results in more than a decade. No.
Walmart is one of the ones that they're on the positive. They're okay. And I think they've tried hard to change and move and get in the right direction, and they're going to succeed. I believe they're going to succeed. But I do find it amazing that Sears, such an iconic brand, Neil, it became a dinosaur in some way.
But you walk into their stores, and I got to tell you,
no energy.
It's nothing.
No energy.
Not only that, it looks like the last time that they buffed their floors was like in 1973. I mean, it's just like
you know what I thought of when I walked in. I got to tell you this. This is what I thought of: Chernobyl. And nobody was there. I'm so sad. Sad.
And I'm sorry, but where do they get some of these people? I mean, it just doesn't look good. It just doesn't look good.
You know what happened to me? Listen, this is the truth.
And I like Sears, by the way.
So do I. But certain things.
The appliances, they're great.
Exactly. I wanted to get a grill. I went in there. Nobody was there. I said, you know what, Gloria? I'm really worried about this place. Didn't buy the grill. Went to Home Depot, bought the grill.
Hey, we're going to talk about power next. I know. Coal, fossil fuels,
power.
The rollback of the clean power plan. You love this.
Where'd that bunny go? It's in here somewhere.
We have Patrice Onwuka coming on from the Independent Women's Forum, and we're going to talk about energy. You don't want to miss it.
Made in America.
Sharply higher at the open, stocks continued to perform well over the course of the day Tuesday.
And I think that bodes well here over the next couple of years for having bigger demands coming to this country.
Now, more of Neil Asbury's Made in America.
Very big welcome to you today. This is Neil Asbury together with co-host Dr. Rich Rothman, and we are having a very, very passionate time here with a number of topics. I mean, we've gone from tariffs to retail, and now we're going to energy. Energy is very, very important. I mean, America has got a huge, huge advantage over just about everywhere else in the world, especially the industrialized countries, because of the abundance of energy in this country. We have truly, truly been blessed. And that means fossil fuels. It means coal. And I got to tell you, I know my progressive and liberal friends, they just go absolutely bananas when you talk about clean coal. But there are clean coal solutions that really achieve so many good things. And if we were truly wanting to clean up the environment, we would develop this clean coal technology, even make it better than it already is, and make it available to places like China, like India, that are going to burn dirty fossil fuels because they don't have the technology, where we do. And we would do more for the environment than anything we possibly could in the short term by perfecting our clean coal technology and making it available around the world. But there's been a big thing happen. President Trump has rolled back the Clean Power Plan of President Obama. One of the things that President Obama did at the end of his administration and said that this was going to change the world forever. Well,
good luck.
Then Donald Trump got elected. We're very pleased to have on with us Patrice Onwuka from the Independent Women's Forum, and we're going to talk about this very important topic. Patrice, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be on.
So tell us about what is, or I should say, what was the Clean Power Plan of President Obama's, and what did President Trump just do to change that?
So the Clean Power Plan under President Obama was, another example of Obama overreach, where, in essence, the EPA released a rule that would force states to cut carbon emissions to something like 32% below 2005 levels. In essence, they wanted every state to come in line and cut carbon emissions by a specific amount. Well, the Trump administration said, hey, wait a minute. There are not only compliance costs that are associated with this. This plan would also harm certain industries in the energy field, specifically coal. And then it would have costs on American families, particularly poor and low-income families, for whom energy costs really suck up a huge amount of their income. So the Trump administration said, hey, let's rescind this requirement that states fall in line with this arbitrary kind of level, and let's allow states, this is a novel idea, but let's allow states to determine what's best for their industries. Not surprisingly, the environmentalists have come out against this, swinging, calling it that the administration is unleashing climate change hell.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's exactly what they're going to do, and it's going to get more vociferous and wild and crazy as the time goes on. I mean, when you think about what the EPA did under Obama, President Obama, was classify, Neil, CO2 as a poisonous gas, which gave them the right to manipulate it and handle it and reduce it and eliminate it completely, which is really amazing because we don't have CO2, the trees die. If the trees die, we don't have oxygen. But, the progressives don't like that conversation. So we go out and we basically destroy the fossil fuel plants. But the truth of the matter is, and we're going to hear this in a few minutes, that the plants are, with clean coal technology, are filtering out the particulates that were being released into the atmosphere. And it's incredibly clean now compared to what it was just 10, 15 years ago. And it's getting better.
Well, and that which is great. So you actually didn't need this overreach, this overreaction by the Obama administration. But what the intention there was is probably to favor the wind and the solar industries, which are still budding, still trying to get their legs under them. Favor them over coal, over fossil fuels. And so, what would have happened once this rule fully went into effect is that you would have had a continued shutdown of coal plants, right? And then, but the industry for these alternatives is still trying to catch up. And that could have left American consumers in the dark, literally, because we would have seen energy shortages, which is exactly the opposite of what you really want.
So, Patrice, was a Clean Power Plan, was that an executive order of President Obama's, meaning that it could be rescinded just as easily as it occurred, and it wasn't legislation going through Congress? Obviously, the Republican Congress would never agree to this. And so what are they likely to do? Are they going to bring it to the courts? But, if it was never law of the land, what can they do about it?
Yep. So this was a reading of the Clean Air Act, which was passed by Congress. The Obama administration, the Obama EPA, did this through regulatory power. Now the Trump administration is doing it also through regulatory power. I actually think, though, that while it's good to roll back one regulation over another, really it's Congress that should make the final decision on how exactly we should be setting these standards and who has, control over it. The original reading of the Clean Air Act, though, was really for federalism, where states and the federal government work together, and states got to decide what's flexible for them based on their own industries. The Obama administration said, hey, no. We want at the federal level to determine what states should do and make states come in line. So this is really just returning that authority back to the states.
And Patrice, on your blog, you were very good and very eloquent of saying how many people are really being impacted about this. It's progressives talk about the people who have these jobs as if they are not even humans. It's like collateral damage. Yeah. It's like thousands and thousands of people from Appalachia, a part of the country that can least afford it. They need these jobs, and yet the technology is there to make it very safe. But, collateral damage, get rid of them. Who cares? It's not my family. It's not my job. It's not, I'm not depending on this. So let it all go away. Let it go away because culturally that fits within our ideology. I mean, very terrible, very sad. Patrice, thanks for coming on the show. Very, very fascinating topic.
Thank you so much for having me.
Coming up, we're going to get back to trade. We're going to get back to NAFTA. Before we talked about tariffs, now we're going to talk hopefully about the lack of tariffs with Tori Whiting from the Heritage Foundation and an update on NAFTA.
Made in America.
A very big welcome to you today. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruff. And so, Rich, we're going to go from tariffs to hopefully the lack of tariffs. And I'm talking about what's going on with NAFTA and specifically what's going on with Mexico. Very fascinating how President Trump has started to work a deal just with Mexico, trying to get something done there, and then bring in Canada. I mean, wow. I mean, that's an interesting negotiating strategy. We're going to find out a little bit more about that. And, what are the prospects of getting something done here? Very pleased to have joining us right now, Tori Whiting from the Heritage Foundation. Tori, welcome to Made in America.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a pleasure to be back.
So I've been seeing a lot of, little hints around the media that something may be imminent with Mexico. So what's going on with that? And, do you have any insight about this sort of negotiating a strategy that the president is using?
Right. So right now, the U.S. and Mexico, officials from those two countries, are discussing some NAFTA-related issues that are more of a bilateral concern. And that's primarily in regards to what we call rules of origin, or the rules that govern how much North American content has to be in an automotive or an automotive part to be able to not have tariffs applied to it. And so they're looking at modifying those rules of origin to actually increase the amount of North American content required. And there's also some talk about wanting to put in wage requirements for a certain amount of the production process to be done at, I believe, $16 per hour or more. So in my mind, those proposals seem more like a regulatory burden for auto producers than really making it easier for Americans to trade. But once the U.S. and the U.S. and Mexico can reach some sort of decision, then they'll take that back to Canada and say, hey, Canada, what do you think about this? Let's button up the rest of this deal.
And what do you think? And what do you think about the steel and the aluminum tariffs? I mean, where does that come in this? I mean, if we did a deal with NAFTA, I guess that would go away, right? I mean, Mexico and Canada would be exempt from those tariffs.
Well, I think that moving forward with the NAFTA negotiations, the president should really drop those steel and aluminum tariffs on Canada and Mexico. These tariffs were applied under national security concerns and really should never be applied to such close allies. And they also shouldn't be used as a cudgel by the White House in NAFTA negotiations or as a negotiating tactic. That's just not good business for the American people who are dealing with higher steel and aluminum prices because of those tariffs. So I'm hoping to see the administration drop those as the NAFTA negotiations move forward.
So where's the optimism in this? Because it appears that, in the article that I read, that there's an announcement coming forward, later in the week. But the trade representative said we don't have a deal yet. So on a 1 to 10, where do we stand with this? What do you think? 10 being the best opportunity to get a deal?
Well, I think that we're definitely having progress, and that is a very positive sign. And really what should be the main priority, well, there's two main priorities, I think, for the administration in this situation. The first is to make sure that we are getting a deal that's going to make it easier for Americans to do business with Mexico and Canada. And the second thing is that we want to make sure our American businesses have certainty in their supply chains that they have been building for over 20 years in North America. And so efforts to finish up the NAFTA negotiations, that's positive because that gives our businesses a signal of, hey, we want to make sure your markets are going to be secure and your supply chains are going to be secure, and that's a priority for us.
You know, what I think, Tori, and hear me out on this, is that, you know, the president is engaged in some pretty high-profile trade disputes right now, namely with China, but not just China, even the European Union, Japan. I mean, you know, this is kind of going all over the world. So now, if the president can make a deal with Mexico, he can kind of point to the others in the world and say, hey, look, you know, I make deals. I made a deal with Mexico. And it was a very tough negotiation, but we got it done, and it's best for both of our countries. I'm very willing to make good deals. So if I was I would line up right now because I'm in the deal-making mode, and I can get it done, but you guys are going to have to come to the table here in earnest and sincerity and let's put our best shot forward here, and let's get a deal done that's good for both of us. So is he using this thing with Mexico to kind of show the others, hey, look, you know, I'm a free trader. I'm a fair trader. I can make deals, and it's you guys are the problem, not me.
Well, I wouldn't necessarily say that is the message coming out of the White House. You know, I think that they just want to make sure that they're improving NAFTA so that can get us into the 21st century with a major focus on modernization. And I think moving forward with wanting to finish up this trade negotiation is a great move for the administration. And a few weeks ago, the president had a meeting with EU Commission President Juncker, where they came to an agreement to start negotiations between the U.S. and the EU with the eventual hope of removing all tariffs and non-tariff barriers on non-auto industrial goods, which is a great step in the right direction. And actually, the EU was in town this week to talk about next steps after that announcement from the U.S. and the EU. So I think that there is movement going forward on a lot of different fronts. It's very encouraging from the administration that there's this change in rhetoric. You know, previously the president kept saying that, you know, when another country is winning on trade, we're losing. America is getting the short end of the stick. But for the first time, he's actually acknowledging that more than one country can win when we trade. Trade is mutually beneficial, and that's a great message to move forward.
Hey, Tori, it's been wonderful to have you back again. We always appreciate your thoughts, and we're going to get you back because I want to like to hear what you think about China. And that's for another day. We'll do that real soon. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me.
Coming up, Dr. Rothman and I are going to have some final thoughts for the day.
Made in America.
Welcome to Made in America. I'm your host, Neil Asbury, together with co-host Dr. Rich Ruffin. So, Rich, you know, talking about NAFTA, you know, I think it's a great thing. I mean, and it's fascinating, too. And I don't know how this occurred, but, you know, how President Trump kind of singled out, well, let's do a deal with Mexico. Let's kind of leave Canada out of this for a while. And then, you know, we'll kind of bring Canada in, you know, after we get a deal with Mexico. So very fascinating there. But, you know, we're talking about tariffs and more tariffs and tariffs here, tariffs there. And, you know, with Europe, with Canada, with, of course, with China, with Japan, it's nice to see that, you know, with Mexico and with NAFTA, hopefully, you know, we have a path to making a trade deal that President Trump believes is good for the American worker. And I believe it will be good for the American worker. It does raise the bar of what free trade and fair trade looks like. And it could be a template for other deals that we do, and hopefully one with China.
No, I agree. And, you know, there is logic to what he's doing. First of all, I believe he knows what he's doing 100%. I don't listen to all this nonsense that he shoots from the hip all the time. Maybe he does a little bit, but he's a pretty smart guy. He's around a pretty good company. And I think it does make sense to bifurcate the two issues, Canada versus Mexico. Cut the deal that you need and let the other guy north of us see that we're cutting this deal. And it puts a little bit more pressure on them to cut their deal. At the same time that young Trudeau, the young guy who was running Canada, and he's like a young Obama, and his power is waning a little bit right now. The fact the immigration policy in Canada is not working in his favor right now. The numbers are shifting. They're concerned with what's happening. And
the open borders.
The open borders is not working for them. So I think it's a good idea to cut the deal with Mexico. I think it's probably easier to do that. The question I had, and I want to ask you, is that they're saying, well, maybe this will be a 5-year deal. This won't be in perpetuity. It won't be forever. It's a 5-year deal. Maybe it's a 5-year deal. Is that good, bad, or indifferent?
I think people want certainty. I think people want to be able to place their bets over a long period of time and know that the carpet's not going to be pulled out from under them. I mean, look at the American entrepreneur, small business owner, a small factory that had to deal and adjust supply chains because China was doing all these things, and China was a source of a lot of low-cost materials, their tooling cost, injection cost, fabrication costs, many just different things. And remember that 50% of what we import from China are raw materials for our own factories. So not only finished goods, and the tariffs are not distinguishing between finished goods and raw materials required by our factories. I mean, we're just hitting everything. So, think about those entrepreneurs who have invested heavily into this supply chain, and then all of a sudden you have the rug pulled out from under them. I mean, that's not fair, and that's not right, because they don't have the money in the deep pockets to be able to go create a whole nother supply chain. And if they did, it would take another 18 to 24 months. And who has that amount of time, with nothing coming in, with no revenue, with no margin coming in? So certainty is very important in making investments, and especially for our smaller businesses and entrepreneurs who can't turn on a dime. They can't turn on a dime. So I would like to see a deal that kind of went on unless there was something there that was, saying, hey, look, you're not, this deal isn't working because you're not honoring your part of the deal. Then, of course, you got to do something about that. But certainty is very important in making decisions, and especially for our entrepreneurs who don't have the resources to have to blow up, the whole way of doing business and now go in a different direction because now this administration wants to do it that way versus another administration said to do it a different way.
Well, I think you summed it up very, very well. But maybe it won't be. No, I agree with everything you said. Next. But I do know I agree with what you're saying, and I think 5 years is too short. Because
what I've read,
can you imagine building a plant and then find out 5 years later, you can't do that anymore?
You can, because it takes you, a good 36 months or so to get a new production facility online, and then you got to work out the kinks. I mean, people have to have certainty; they have to have a longer horizon to work with.
Well, I agree with you. Now I'm going to segue for a second. Very, very important. PETA, P-E-T-A, the people who are in favor of equal and nice treatment for animals, they have taken animal crackers to task. And this week, animal crackers have released, I use that word on purpose, the animals from being in cages on the old-fashioned animal crackers, the little thing that you carry when you were a kid with a string across, and it says Barnum's Animal Crackers, and the animals are in cages. Well, PETA thought that was unfair to the animals. So they now have the box showing the animals loose in the pampas and the savannas of Africa. And they have the animals smiling. So I just want you to know that the lunacy of the crazies is still out there. But the animals are happy on animal crackers.
Well, Rich, unfortunately, we're out of time. But we're going to be back again next week for another adventure of Made in America, where we never stop fighting for your jobs.